The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal domes of New Hope Colony. Commander Zixtel stood at the observation deck, watching the children play in the garden below. Their laughter echoed through the transparent walls, a sound that had become rare in recent months. The Zephyrian children moved with natural grace, their translucent skin catching the light like living jewels. 3 years had passed since the Devourers destroyed their homeworld. 3 years since 10,000 survivors fled to this small mining colony on the edge of nowhere. Kepler 442b was not a beautiful world like their lost home, but it was safe. Or so they had believed. "Commander, we have an urgent message from the Galactic Council," said Velena, his deputy. Her voice carried the musical quality of their people, but today it trembled with worry. Zixtel turned from the window. Velena's large eyes were darker than usual, a sign of deep concern among their kind. She held a quantum communicator in her delicate hands, its blue light pulsing with an incoming transmission. "Put it through," he said, though something in his chest told him this would not be good news. The holographic image of Council Speaker Thromaxis appeared before them. The Altarian leader's 4 arms moved in the formal gesture of official business. His voice was cold and emotionless as always. "Commander Zixtel of the Zephyrian refugees. The Galactic Council has completed its review of your species' status. After careful consideration of economic factors and resource allocation, we have determined that continued protection of your people is no longer viable." The words hit Zixtel like physical blows. What does that mean exactly? "It means the Council withdraws all support effective immediately. All member species will cease providing protection, supplies, and communication services to your colony. You have 24 hours to make final arrangements." Velena stepped forward, her voice rising with emotion. "But we have children here, families, we have nowhere else to go." Thromaxis' expression did not change. "The galaxy is vast. Find your own way. The Council's resources must be directed toward species that can contribute to galactic progress." The transmission ended, leaving them in stunned silence. Zixtel felt his legs grow weak. He had feared this day would come, but hoping had been easier than accepting reality. "What do we tell the people?" Velena asked. Before he could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the colony. The transport ships were already departing. Through the observation windows, they could see the massive Council vessels lifting off from the landing pads. The ships that had brought them supplies and medicine were leaving forever. Within hours, the colony buzzed with panic. Families gathered in the main hall, their faces filled with fear and confusion. The elderly sat in quiet despair while parents held their children close. The quantum communication array was being dismantled by Council technicians, cutting their last link to the outside galaxy. Dr. Linara, the colony's chief medical officer, approached Zixtel with urgent reports. "Commander, they took most of our medical supplies. We have maybe 2 weeks of medicine left, and the power core is failing without their maintenance support." Engineer Torvik brought more bad news. "The water recycling system needs parts we don't have. The food production domes are already showing signs of failure. Without Council support, we might have a month before critical systems begin shutting down." Zixtel gathered his senior staff in the command center. The room felt empty without the Council liaison officers who had occupied it for 3 years. Maps and status displays showed the grim reality of their situation. They were alone on a hostile world with failing systems and no way to call for help. "We need to focus on survival," he told his team. "Extend the food supplies by reducing rations. Start repair work on critical systems using whatever materials we can find, and prepare the people for what's coming." "What about the children?" asked Velena. "They don't understand what's happening. We tell them the truth, but gently. They deserve to know, but we don't want to cause panic." As night fell over the colony, families gathered in their homes. The crystal domes that had seemed so beautiful now felt like prison walls. Parents sang old songs to their children, trying to maintain some normalcy in a world that had suddenly become very dangerous. Zixtel walked through the corridors, checking on his people. In the medical bay, he found Dr. Linara working late into the night trying to stretch their remaining supplies. In the engineering section, Torvik and his team were pulling apart non-essential systems to repair the critical ones. How long do we really have? Zixtel asked Torvik privately. The engineer's face was grim. 2 weeks for the water system, maybe 3 for power. Food will last longer if we cut rations severely, but people will start getting sick. And if the Devourers find us? Then none of it matters. The Devourers were the reason they were here. In the first place, the machine race had appeared from outside the galaxy 5 years ago, consuming entire worlds to fuel their expansion. They had turned the Zephyrian homeworld into a lifeless husk in less than a day. Only the Council's intervention had saved the survivors. Now they were alone. On the 3rd day after the abandonment, Junior Technician Kylvin was monitoring the long-range sensors when something unusual appeared on his screens. Energy signatures. At the edge of the system, moving slowly but steadily toward them. "Commander," he called over the communication system. "I'm detecting ships approaching from the outer system." Zixtel rushed to the command center. The signatures were unlike anything in their databases. The ships used primitive fusion drives and basic electromagnetic communications. They looked crude and simple compared to the elegant council vessels. Could they be traitors? Velena asked hopefully. "No," said Kylvin, studying the readings. "These ships are too small for major trade runs. And look at this construction. It's like they built these things out of scrap metal." The ships were still several days away, but their trajectory was clear. They were heading directly for the colony. Zixtel felt a chill run through him. Were these pirates, coming to take what little they had left? Or worse, could they be advanced scouts for the Devourers? "Keep monitoring them," he ordered. "And prepare our people for possible evacuation to the underground shelters." As the unknown ships drew closer, the colony's fear grew. Children were kept inside the domes while adults watched the sky with nervous eyes. The elderly spoke in whispers about omens and the end of their people, but Zixtel had not given up hope. His people had survived the destruction of their world. They had crossed the galaxy as refugees and built a new life in this harsh place. They would not surrender now. "We are Zephyrians," he told the gathered colonists. "We have faced darkness before and survived. Whatever comes, we will face it together." The ships were now close enough to see clearly. They were definitely not council vessels. These ships looked rough and functional, built for work rather than beauty. They carried no familiar markings or identification codes. As the first of the unknown vessels entered orbit around their world, Zixtel stood at the command center with his staff. Whatever happened next would determine the fate of his people. They had been abandoned by the galaxy, left to die on a forgotten world, but perhaps, just perhaps, salvation had come from an unexpected source. The communication system crackled to life. A voice spoke in broken galactic standard with an accent, unlike anything they had heard before. "This is Captain Jake Murphy of the Earth vessel Independence. We received your distress signal and came to help. Are you in need of assistance?" Zixtel stared at the communication console. Earth, he had never heard of such a place. But the voice sounded concerned, even kind. After 3 days of despair, hope began to flicker in his chest once again. Commander Zixtel stared at the communication console, his heart beating faster than it had in days. The voice speaking broken galactic standard was unlike anything he had heard before. It was rough around the edges, but there was something warm about it, something that suggested these strangers actually cared. "This is Commander Zixtel of New Hope Colony," he replied carefully. "We are in desperate need of assistance. Who are you?" "What is Earth?" A pause followed. Then the voice returned, sounding surprised. "Earth is our home planet. We're humans. We've been tracking radio signals from this sector for months. We thought someone was in trouble." Velena leaned closer to the console. "Humans? We have never heard of your species. Are you part of the Galactic Council?" "Council? No, we've never been invited to join any council. We're just explorers, I guess. Independent contractors doing survey work in this region." Zixtel exchanged glances with his staff. These humans were not part of the council structure. They were complete unknowns which could be dangerous or miraculous. Given their current situation, he was willing to take the risk. Captain Murphy, we are refugees from the Zephyrian homeworld. The council has abandoned us here, and our supplies are running low. We have over 10,000 people, including many children and elderly. Another pause. When the voice returned, it was harder, more determined. Abandoned you? What kind of people abandon refugees? The kind that value profit over lives, Velena said quietly. Well, we're not that kind. Stand by, Commander. We're coming down to talk face to face. The communication ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Calvin was still monitoring the approaching ships, his readings showing 5 vessels of various sizes. They were definitely primitive by galactic standards, but they seemed functional. Commander, Calvin said, their largest ship is requesting permission to land. It's about the size of a council transport, but built very differently. Grant permission, Zixtel decided. But keep the defense grid active, just in case. What defense grid? Torvik asked dryly. The council took most of our weapons when they left. Within an hour, the human ship was descending toward the colonies. Main landing pad. Zixtel gathered his senior staff and headed for the airlock. He had no idea what to expect from these mysterious humans, but anything was better than slowly dying alone. The ship that landed was unlike any vessel he had ever seen. It was built from gray metal plates welded together in a rough but sturdy pattern. Burn marks along the hull showed it had seen action. Strange symbols were painted on its side, along with the words UES Independence in both human writing and galactic standard. A ramp lowered from the ship's belly, and figures began. Walking down, Zixtel's first sight of humans was shocking. They were shorter than Zephyrians, with solid bodies and opaque skin. Their faces were hard and angular, completely different from the graceful features of his people. They looked like they had been built for war rather than peace. The leader stepped forward and removed his helmet. He was a middle-aged man with short dark hair and intense eyes. His face was weathered and scarred, telling stories of a hard life. When he spoke, his voice was the same one they had heard over the radio. Commander Zixtel, I'm Captain Jake Murphy. These are my officers, Lisa Bell and Sam Rodriguez. The woman named Lisa was smaller than Jake, with red hair pulled back in a practical style. She carried a device that looked like a translation computer. The man called Sam was big and muscular, with gentle eyes that seemed out of place on his tough face. Welcome to New Hope Colony, Zixtel said, trying to maintain dignity despite their desperate situation. We appreciate your response to our distress signal. Jake looked around the landing pad, taking in the crystal domes and the graceful architecture of the colony. This is beautiful work. Your people built all this? We adapted existing mining facilities, Velena explained. Our people have always been skilled with crystal technology. And the council just left you here to die? Lisa asked, anger clear in her voice. They determined we were not economically viable, Zixtel said. The words bitter in his mouth, Sam spat on the ground, a gesture that somehow conveyed his opinion perfectly. That's the most heartless thing I've ever heard. Jake studied the Zephyrian leaders carefully. Despite their elegant appearance, he could see the stress and fear in their large eyes. These were good people facing impossible odds. How long do you have? He asked directly. Maybe 2 weeks before critical systems fail, Torvik admitted. Less if the Devourers find us. Devourers? Jake's expression grew serious. Machine beings from outside the galaxy. They consume entire worlds. They destroyed our home and are hunting the survivors. Jake turned to Lisa. Send word to the fleet. Tell them we're going to need every ship we have. Captain, Lisa said quietly, we're not equipped for a major evacuation. We have cargo ships, not passenger vessels. Then we'll make it work. We're not leaving these people to die. The simple certainty in his voice surprised Zixtel. This human barely knew them, yet he was willing to risk his ships and crew for strangers. It was the kind of behavior the council would have called inefficient and wasteful. Why would you help us? Zixtel asked. What do you gain from this? Jake looked puzzled by the question. What do we gain? We save lives. That's enough. Over the following hours, more human ships arrived. Each one was different, clearly built for specific purposes rather than mass production. There was a medical ship called the Mercy, mining vessels named the Digger and the Prospector, and a military escort called the Defiant. The humans worked with an energy that amazed the Zephyrians. They immediately began assessing the colony's needs and figuring out solutions. Dr. Alex Chun from the medical ship worked with Dr. Linara to inventory their remaining supplies. Engineer Rodriguez teamed up with Torvek to examine the failing systems. Your crystal technology is incredible, Sam told Torvik as they worked on the power core. We've never seen anything like it. Your fusion drive is quite ingenious, Torvik replied. Very robust design, built to last. Built to survive, more like it. We don't have the luxury of replacing things every few years. The cultural exchange was fascinating to watch. The humans were direct and practical, while the Zephyrians were graceful and thoughtful. Yet they found common ground in their shared desire to solve problems and protect their people. Lisa Bell spent time with the Zephyrian children, teaching them basic human words while learning their musical language. The children were initially afraid of the strange-looking humans, but Lisa's patience and kindness soon won them over. Your species is very young, Velena observed as she watched the interaction. How long have you been traveling between stars? About 50 years, Jake replied. We're still learning. Most of the galaxy seems to think we're too primitive to bother with. The Council never mentioned humans at all, Zixtel said. They act like you don't exist. Maybe that's been a blessing, Jake said grimly. If they're the type to abandon refugees, I'm not sure we want their attention. As the first day of cooperation ended, both species had learned much about each other. The humans were impressed by Zephyrian compassion and artistic skill. The Zephyrians were amazed by human determination and practical ingenuity, but their peaceful interaction was interrupted by urgent alarms from the sensor station. Kailvanes' voice echoed through the colony's communication system. Commander, we have multiple contacts approaching from the outer system. The energy signatures matched Devourer scout ships. The command center erupted in controlled panic. The Zephyrians had always known this day would come, but they had hoped for more time. The humans looked grim but not afraid. How long before they arrive? Jake asked. 18 hours, maybe less, Kailvan replied. Jake turned to his officers. Lisa, contact the fleet. Tell them we have hostiles incoming. Sam, start working on emergency evacuation procedures with the Zephyrians. Captain, Zixtel said quietly, you don't have to stay. Your people have done enough by offering to help us evacuate. Jake looked at him with something like surprise. Commander, we don't abandon people when they're in trouble. That's not who we are, but you'll be outnumbered and outgunned. The Devourers are relentless. Then we'll have to be more stubborn than they are, Jake said with a slight smile. Besides, someone has to teach these machines that there are still people in the galaxy who fight for what's right. As the colony prepared for the coming battle, Zixtel felt something he hadn't experienced in years, hope. These crude, violent-looking humans had shown more compassion in one day than the entire Galactic Council had in 3 years. Perhaps they had been rescued by exactly the right people after all. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of desperate activity. The human ships worked alongside the Zephyrian colonists, preparing for a battle that everyone knew they could not win through conventional means. But Jake Murphy had not brought his people this far to give up without a fight. We evacuate the children and elderly first, Jake announced to the combined human and Zephyrian leadership. The cargo ships can carry more people than passengers, but it won't be comfortable. Doctor, Lenara nodded grimly. The medical ship can take our most critical patients. But what about the rest of us? We fight, said Marine Sergeant Katie Adams, who had arrived on the military ship Defiant. She was a compact woman with short blonde hair and the kind of scars that told stories. We make these machines pay for every inch of ground. Velena looked uncertain. Our people are not warriors. We have never been a violent species. Then we'll teach you what you need to know, Katie said simply. Basic survival tactics. How to hide, how to run, how to fight if you have no other choice. The Zephyrians were reluctant students, but desperation made them willing to learn. Katie showed them how to use the colony's mining equipment as weapons, how to create simple traps, and how to move quietly through the crystal corridors. Their graceful movements, normally used for art and ceremony, proved surprisingly useful for stealth. Meanwhile, Sam Rodriguez worked with Torvik to prepare the colony's defenses. They rigged explosive charges in the main tunnels, set up ambush points with improvised weapons, and created backup communication systems using both human and Zephyrian technology. Your crystal resonance technology is incredible, Sam said as they worked on a hybrid communication device. It's like your crystals can talk to each other across space. Your fusion technology is very stable, Torvik replied. Much more reliable than our power cells. Perhaps we can combine them. The collaboration between the two species was producing remarkable results. Human industrial know-how merged with Zephyrian precision engineering created tools and weapons that neither species could have made alone. Dr. Alex Chun set up a field hospital in the colony's main medical bay, working closely with Dr. Linara. The human doctor was amazed by the Zephyrian healing techniques, while Linara was impressed by human emergency medicine. Your people are very difficult to kill, Linara observed as she studied human anatomy charts. Multiple backup systems, redundant organs, incredible pain tolerance. Evolution on a dangerous world, Alex explained. We had to get tough to survive. Your people seem much more delicate. We evolved for harmony, not conflict. Perhaps that was a mistake. Maybe, Alex said, preparing surgical instruments. But your compassion and artistic skills are things we could never create through violence. Every species has something valuable to offer. As the hours passed, the approaching devourer ships grew larger on the sensors. The mechanical vessels were massive, dark shapes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with the cold precision of machines, showing no concern for the lives they were about to destroy. 5 ships, Calvin reported from the sensor station. 1 mothership, 4 smaller attack vessels. They'll be in weapons range in 3 hours. Jake studied the tactical display with his officers. The human fleet was completely outmatched. 5 small ships against 5 large ones, with the enemy having superior weapons and armor. In a straight fight, they would be destroyed in minutes. We need to be smart about this, he told his captains over the communication system. We can't win through firepower, so we use speed and cunning. Captain Maria Santos of the medical ship Mercy spoke up. My ship is the fastest. I can draw their fire while the others evacuate civilians. Negative, Jake replied firmly. We need you intact to treat the wounded. The Defiant will run interference. Commander Ryan Phillips of the military ship nodded. We're the most heavily armored. We can take more punishment than the others. The cargo ships will focus on evacuation, Jake continued. Get as many people off-world as possible. If we can't save everyone, we save who we can. The evacuation began immediately. Zephyrian families were loaded onto the human cargo ships, their few possessions clutched in their hands. The children were frightened but brave, trusting their parents and the strange humans who had come to help them. Lisa Bell worked with Velena to organize the evacuation lists. The Zephyrian deputy insisted that the leadership should be the last to leave, while Lisa argued for practical distribution based on ship capacity. Your people have such a strong sense of duty, Lisa observed as they worked. Even in crisis. You think of others first? Is that not normal? Velena asked. How do humans handle such situations? We argue, we fight, we make hard choices. But in the end, we usually do the right thing. It just takes us longer to figure out what that is. As the first cargo ship lifted off with its load of Zephyrian refugees, the Devourer ships entered the outer system. They immediately began scanning the planet, their sensors probing for signs of life and valuable resources. They know we're here, Calvin announced. They're changing course to intercept. Jake made his decision. All ships launch immediately. We engage them in space before they can reach the planet. The small human fleet rose from the colony's landing pads, their primitive engines leaving trails of fire in the atmosphere. They formed a loose formation, with the military ship in the lead and the cargo vessels protected in the center. The Devourer ships responded by spreading out, trying to surround the human fleet. Their weapons were massive energy cannons that could vaporize smaller ships with a single hit. Their armor was thick and dark, designed to absorb and redirect enemy fire. "This is it," Jake announced over the fleet communication system. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to buy time for the evacuation. Stay mobile. Stay unpredictable, and whatever happens, don't let them get past us to the planet." The battle began with a devastating exchange of fire. The Devourer ships opened up with their energy cannons, sending beams of destruction toward the human fleet. But the humans were already moving, their ships weaving and dodging with a chaotic pattern that confused the mechanical minds of their enemies. The cargo ship, Prospector, took a glancing hit that knocked out its shields, but kept flying. The medical ship Mercy used its superior speed to dart between the enemy ships, drawing fire away from the more vulnerable vessels. "They're trying to box us in," Ryan reported from the Defiant. "Standard mechanical tactics. They want to limit our movement." "Then we do something they don't expect," Jake replied. "All ships ramming speed. We're going right through their formation." The human fleet accelerated directly toward the Devourer ships, their captains pushing their engines beyond safe limits. The mechanical vessels programmed for efficient destruction. "We're not prepared for such reckless tactics." Jake's ship, the Independence, led the charge directly at the Devourer mothership. Energy beams lanced out, but the human ship was already changing course, sliding past the massive vessel's weapons and firing at point-blank range into its hull. The improvised attack caused significant damage, but the Devourer ship was far from destroyed. Its return fire caught the Independence in the engine section, causing explosions that sent the ship spinning out of control. "Engine room is gone," Sam reported grimly. "We're running on backup power only." But the desperate attack had achieved its purpose. The Devourer formation was broken, their ships scattered and confused by the humans' unpredictable tactics. The cargo vessels used the confusion to escape toward the edge of the system, carrying their loads of Zephyrian refugees to safety on the planet below. The remaining colonists watched the battle through the colony's sensors. The humans were clearly outmatched, but they fought with a ferocity that amazed the peaceful Zephyrians. "They're sacrificing themselves for us," Commander Zixtel said quietly. "People they barely know." "This is what courage looks like," Velena replied. "We have much to learn from these humans." The battle raged for hours, with the human ships using hit-and-run tactics to avoid destruction. But gradually the superior firepower of the Devourer ships began to tell. The mining vessel Digger was destroyed, its crew of 12 lost in the explosion. The medical ship Mercy was severely damaged and forced to retreat. As the human fleet fought its desperate battle, more Zephyrian civilians were evacuated from the planet. But time was running out, and everyone knew that the small human fleet could not hold out much longer against the relentless mechanical assault. The real test of human determination was about to begin. The Independence shuddered under another direct hit from the Devourer mothership. Sparks flew from damaged control panels, and the smell of burning electronics filled the bridge. Jake Murphy gripped his command chair as the ship spun through space, its engines barely keeping it stable. "Damage report," he called out over the noise of failing systems. "Hull breach on Deck 3, Sam Rodriguez reported from the engineering station. "Life support is failing in sections 4 through 7. We've lost main power to the weapons array." Lisa Bell looked up from her communications console, her face pale but determined. "Captain, the last evacuation ship just cleared the atmosphere. All Zephyrian civilians are off-planet." Jake felt a moment of relief. They had done it. Over 10,000 innocent people were safe, flying toward human space in the cargo ships. But the cost had been enormous. The mining vessel Digger was gone, destroyed with all hands. The Mercy was badly damaged and limping away on emergency power. The Defiant was still fighting, but barely holding together. "Sir," Ryan Phillips called. From the military ship, "We can't keep this up much longer. My ship is down to 20% hull integrity." Jake studied the tactical display. The Devourer ships were closing in, their mechanical precision slowly overcoming human desperation. Soon they would break through and pursue the evacuation fleet. All those innocent lives would be lost unless something drastic happened, he made. His decision: "All ships, this is Captain Murphy. Begin immediate withdrawal to the edge of the system. Form up with the evacuation fleet and prepare for jump to human space." "What about you, Captain?" Ryan asked. "The Independence is too damaged to make the journey. We'll stay behind and buy you more time." The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what Jake was saying. The Independence would make a final stand alone against 5 Devourer ships. It was a suicide mission, and they all knew it. "Captain," Sam said quietly, "the crew should know. They deserve a choice." Jake nodded and opened the ship-wide communication channel. "Attention all hands, this is the captain. Our mission to evacuate the Zephyrian refugees has been successful. All civilian ships are safe and heading for human space. However, our ship is too damaged to make the journey with them." He paused, looking around the bridge at his crew. These people had followed him across the galaxy, trusted him with their lives, and never once questioned his decisions. They deserved better than to die in this forgotten corner of space. "I'm ordering all non-essential personnel to transfer to the escape pods. The Defiant will pick you up on their way out of the system. Anyone who wants to stay and help with the final phase of our mission is welcome to do so." The response was immediate. Not a single person moved toward the escape pods. Chief Engineer Rodriguez spoke for all of them when he said, "With respect, Captain, we didn't come this far to abandon ship now." "Sir," added Navigation Officer Tony Walsh, "we knew the risks when we took this job. These Devourer machines need to learn that humans don't back down from bullies." Jake felt a surge of pride in his crew. They were scared, he could see it in their faces, but they were staying anyway. That was what made humans special, he thought. Not their technology or their weapons, but their willingness to stand up for what was right, even when it cost them everything. "Then we finish this together," he said. "Lisa, send a message to Commander Zixtel on the evacuation fleet. Tell him it's been an honor to serve alongside his people." The message was transmitted just as the Devourer ships began their final approach. The mechanical vessels moved in perfect formation, their weapons charging for the killing blow. They had calculated that the damaged human ship posed no significant threat. They were about to learn how wrong mechanical thinking could be. "Sam, how much power do we have left in the reactor?" Jake asked. "About 30% of normal output. Why? Can you overload it?" Sam's eyes widened as he understood. "You want to turn the ship into a bomb? The biggest bomb we can make. Those machines think in terms of efficiency and calculated risk. Let's show them what human desperation looks like." The Independence changed course, accelerating directly toward the Devourer mothership. The massive mechanical vessel was 10 times larger than the human ship, its dark hull bristling with weapons and armor. It was designed to withstand any conventional attack, but there was nothing conventional about what Jake Murphy was planning. "All remaining crew to the bridge," he ordered. "If we're going to do this, we do it together." The surviving crew members gathered on the bridge, their faces showing a mixture of fear and determination. Dr. Alex Chun had stayed behind instead of evacuating with the medical ship. Chief Petty Officer Nancy Hayes had refused to abandon her post in the communications center. Gunner's mate First Class Bob Wilson still manned the weapons station, even though half the guns were destroyed. "It's been an honor serving with all of you," Jake told them as the ship raced toward its target. "What we're doing here today will be remembered. Those 10,000 Zephyrians will live because we chose to act. Their children will grow up free, because we decided that some things are worth dying for." The Devourer mothership's weapons began firing, massive energy beams lancing out toward the approaching human vessel. But Jake had learned something about the mechanical minds during the battle. They were predictable, following programmed patterns. That could be anticipated. He threw the ship into a wild series of evasive maneuvers, using every trick he had learned in 50 years of flying. The Independence dodged and weaved through the energy barrage, taking hits but staying on course. 15 seconds to impact, Tony called out. Sam, initiate reactor overload, Jake ordered. Overload initiated. We have maybe 10 seconds before. Containment fails. The Devourer mothership seemed to realize what was happening. Its weapons fire became more desperate, more concentrated. Energy beams struck the Independence repeatedly, tearing through its hull and destroying entire sections of the ship, but it was too late. The Independence struck the mothership at the base of its main weapons array, driving deep into the mechanical vessel's hull before the overloaded reactor finally exploded. The blast was visible from the edge of the system, a brief new star that outshone the local sun. When the light faded, both ships were gone, the remaining Devourer vessels, their command. Ship destroyed and their formation shattered, retreated into the darkness of space. Without the mothership's coordination, they lost interest in the pursuit and returned to whatever mechanical purpose drove them across the galaxy on the evacuation fleet. Commander Zixtel watched the explosion through the observation windows. Of the cargo ship? Tears ran down his face, the first time he had cried since the destruction of his homeworld. They saved us, he whispered to Velena. Complete strangers, and they gave their lives to save us. Captain Murphy said something to me before the battle, Velena replied. He said that his people don't abandon others when they're in trouble. I thought it was just words. It wasn't words. It was a promise. Dr. Lenara joined them at the observation window. How do we honor such a sacrifice? How do we repay a debt like this? We live, Zixtel said simply. We remember. And we make sure their sacrifice means something. Commander Ryan Phillips took over as fleet commander, his damaged ship leading the evacuation convoy toward human space. The journey would take weeks, but they were safe now. The Devourers were gone, and the Zephyrian people would survive. As the ships entered hyperspace, carrying their precious cargo of refugees toward a new home, the crew of the Independence was remembered not as victims, but as heroes. They had shown the galaxy what humans were truly capable of when they chose to stand up for what was right. Jake Murphy and his crew had died as they lived, fighting for others and refusing to surrender to evil. Their sacrifice would echo through the stars, inspiring others to acts of courage and compassion. The Zephyrians were saved, but more importantly, they had learned what it meant to have allies who would never abandon them. In the vast darkness of space, they had found a people who shared their values of compassion and protection of the innocent. The galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442b, the Luna colony was thriving in ways no one had expected. What had started as a temporary refugee settlement had become something much more important. The partnership between humans and Zephyrians was creating technologies and ideas that neither species could have achieved alone. Commander Zixtel stood in the observation dome overlooking the construction site where the new joint research facility was taking shape. Human workers in bulky environment suits labored alongside graceful Zephyrians whose natural abilities allowed them to work in the low gravity without assistance. The fusion of their different approaches to engineering was producing remarkable results. The crystal matrix is ready for integration with the fusion core, Dr. Lenara reported as she joined him at the window. She had adapted well to human medical techniques while teaching the human doctors about Zephyrian healing methods that seemed almost magical. Dr. Chun believes the hybrid power system will be 3 times more efficient than either of our technologies alone, Zixtel replied. Captain Murphy would have been amazed to see what his sacrifice made possible. The mention of Jake Murphy brought the familiar sadness that still touched everyone who had survived the evacuation. The human captain and his crew had become legends among the Zephyrian people. Children sang songs about their courage, and adults spoke their names with reverence usually reserved for ancient heroes. The memorial is almost complete, Velena said as she approached them. She had been working with human architects to design a monument that honored both species' traditions. The humans insisted it should not focus on death, but on the life that was preserved. The memorial was typically human in its practical optimism. Instead of a somber tomb, it was a living garden, where Zephyrian crystal trees grew alongside earth flowers. Children from both species played there, learning together and forming friendships that would last lifetimes, but the real changes were happening on a much larger scale. The partnership between humans and Zephyrians had attracted attention throughout the galaxy. Species that had been dismissed or ignored by the Galactic Council were sending representatives to Luna, asking about joining this new alliance. Ambassador Susan Carter had arrived from Earth 3 months earlier to serve as the human representative in these discussions. She was a middle-aged woman with silver hair and the kind of steady confidence that came from years of diplomatic service. Unlike the polished representatives of the Council species, she spoke plainly and kept her promises. "The Galactic Council has finally agreed to meet with us," Susan announced as she entered the command center. "They want to discuss the unauthorized military action in the Kepler system." Zixtel almost smiled at the Council's description of the rescue. "They seem upset that someone acted without their permission." "They're more upset that we succeeded," Susan replied. The other Council species are asking uncomfortable questions about why they abandoned the Zephyrians in the first place. The political situation in the galaxy had become increasingly unstable since news of the rescue spread. Several member species of the Council were demanding reforms, while others insisted that human interference with their decisions was unacceptable. The unity that had once defined the Council was cracking. "What do they want from us?" Velena asked. "Officially, they want to discuss regulations for future rescue operations. Unofficially, they want to figure out how to control us." Commander Ryan Phillips, now Admiral of the Joint Human-Zephyrian Fleet, joined the conversation. His ship, the Defiant, had been repaired and upgraded with hybrid technology that made it more powerful than many Council vessels. "They should be more worried about the species that are leaving the Council," Ryan said. "The Andromedans formally withdrew yesterday. The Tau Ceti colonies are voting on independence next week." The exodus from the Galactic Council was accelerating as more species learned about alternatives to the Council's cold bureaucracy. The Human-Zephyrian Alliance offered something different: protection based on moral principles rather than economic calculations. "We need to be careful," Susan warned. "The Council still has significant military power. If they decide we're a threat to galactic stability, they might take direct action." "Let them try," Ryan said grimly. "Our new ships are designed to fight, not just look impressive." The hybrid vessels being built in Luna's orbital shipyards were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. They combined human durability and tactical flexibility with Zephyrian precision and crystal technology. More importantly, they were crewed by people who believed in what they were fighting for. The day of the Council meeting arrived with appropriate ceremony. The ancient chamber of species on the neutral world of Concordia had not seen such tension in centuries. Representatives from dozens of worlds gathered to witness what many believed would determine the future of galactic civilization. Susan Carter entered the chamber accompanied by Zixtel and Velena. Their simple clothing and direct manner contrasted sharply with the elaborate robes and formal protocols of the Council representatives. They looked like what they were: practical people who solved problems instead of creating them. Council Speaker Thromaxis called the session to order with his usual cold formality. "We are here to address the unauthorized military intervention in the Kepler system by the self-proclaimed Human-Zephyrian Alliance. We are here to explain why we saved lives when you chose to abandon them." Susan replied simply. The exchange that followed revealed the fundamental difference between the two approaches to galactic governance. The Council spoke of regulations, procedures, and economic efficiency. The Alliance spoke of moral responsibility, protection of the innocent, and the value of every life. The Zephyrian refugees were properly classified as non-viable, insisted Representative Kolthara of the Centauri Federation. Resources must be allocated based on logical criteria. "Logical criteria?" Zixtel stood to address the chamber. You abandoned 10,000 people, including children, because saving them was inconvenient. That is not logic. That is cowardice. The chamber erupted in angry voices from the council species, but their protests were drowned out by applause from the representatives of smaller worlds. The battle lines were clearly drawn. Susan waited for the noise to die down before delivering the speech that would reshape galactic politics. Her words were simple but carried the weight of absolute conviction. Honored representatives, we offer the galaxy a choice. You can continue to follow leaders who abandon the helpless when it becomes expensive to protect them. Or you can join us in building something better. She gestured to Zixtel and Velena. 6 months ago, these people were refugees facing extinction. Today, they are our partners in creating technologies that benefit everyone. We did not save them because it was profitable. We saved them because it was right. The Human-Zephyrian Alliance will protect any species that asks for our help, regardless of their economic value or political importance. We will defend the weak against the strong, the peaceful against the aggressive, and the innocent against those who would harm them. We do not ask for tribute or demand submission. We ask only that our allies share our commitment to protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The silence that followed was broken by the representative of the Kepler mining colonies, a small group of worlds that had always been ignored by the Council. The Kepler colonies formally request membership in the Human-Zephyrian Alliance. He announced, within minutes, dozens of other representatives were making similar declarations. Species that had been dismissed as unimportant by the Council were choosing to align themselves with the Alliance. The chamber was in chaos as the political order that had ruled the galaxy for centuries began to collapse. Council Speaker Thermaxis called for order, but his authority was evaporating. The smaller species were no longer afraid of Council disapproval. They had seen what humans and Zephyrians could accomplish together, and they wanted to be part of something better. 3 months later, construction began on Sanctuary Station in the neutral zone between Council and Alliance space. The massive facility was designed to house and protect refugee species from anywhere in the galaxy. Its message was simple but powerful. No one would be abandoned again. Admiral Ryan Phillips watched the construction from the bridge of his flagship, thinking about Jake Murphy and the crew of the Independence. Their sacrifice had saved more than 10,000 Zephyrian refugees. It had changed the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. Admiral, his communications officer reported, we're receiving a distress call from the Outer Rim. Another species that the Council has declared non-viable. Ryan smiled as he gave the order that was becoming routine. Set course for the Outer Rim, maximum speed. The galaxy was a big place, but it was no longer big enough for those who would prey on the innocent. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, Jake Murphy's spirit lived on in every rescue mission, every act of courage, and every decision to stand up for what was right. The age of abandonment was over. The age of protection had begun.